The following program, Normal Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting normal.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of Normal Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of Normal. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents Normal Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, Normal's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes. Welcome. It is Thursday, December 8th, 2011, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for this next 60 minutes of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. That is if you're listening by podcast. If you're listening live, we got 2 hours coming up for you. The first hour with interviews and news, and the second hour with your views and call-ins at 971-533-7111. All sorts of things to talk about today. You know, I did want to make mention of a story that happened while I was out on vacation. This was, you may have heard this story of Alec Baldwin, the actor from 30 Rock, getting kicked off his American Airlines plane at LAX when he wouldn't turn off his cell phone. Well, you know, I fly a lot. I fly every month, and I just wrote up a quick little reply to Alec Baldwin that I wanted to make public here about him and his apology to the fellow passengers that he was flying with on that American Airlines flight. I was actually in LAX coming in on an American Airlines flight at the time. So this is my personal response to Alec Baldwin. Alec, I fly every month on the cheapest airline that will get me to my gig. I don't even get Admirals Club. I get Southwest.com. I don't get the 1950s gym teacher paying attention to me in first class. I get a metal armrest digging into my thigh, and any attention I get from her is from her cart ramming my elbow or knee as she's delivering my 4 ounces of stale Sprite and pack of 13 mini pretzels. While you've doubtlessly traveled more air miles to many more luxurious places than I have, I get such thrills as PDX to LAX to DFW to JPL with a plane change at each stop. I don't check baggage. I pack one actually carry-on sized bag and my mini Netbeck. I don't wear belt or a jewelry and only slip-on shoes, so my passage through the terror spreading agency will be as brief and as efficient as possible. You and I, Alec, are even the same size, 5'11.5". I'm packing about 250 pounds. I'd estimate maybe you're a little skinnier than that, but probably close. So if you think your experience flying is unpleasant, try a window coach seat on a Bombardier to Missoula next to an obese woman who's literally flowing over into your lap with your carry-on taking up your underseat legroom. So, if I'd have been forced to endure the extra gate time because you couldn't be bothered to stop playing Words with Friends, I would have kicked you right in your sweaty balls. There we go. So I just had to get that off my chest. Coming up on today's show, all sorts of good stuff on the Normal Network. We've got It's Drug Test Thursday on the news. A ton of stories about drug testing in Georgia, New Jersey, Florida, California, and the NBA. So we'll cover that in our news today. Also, we'll try to get to that NYPD arrest story. Granny Perps is giving away joints for canned food donations for food drives, and Sacramento's outlawing all business licenses that have to do with federally illegal businesses. That's their trick this time. We've got your Daily Toker tunes for the day as well. For our Groovin' Thursday today, we're going to go with Lucid Music and a tune called 320. So you have an hour to prepare, I guess. And then our guest today, Tony Ryan from LEAP, a former lieutenant with the Denver Police Department, and Toke of the Town's Steve Elliott, author of The Little Black Book of Marijuana, joins us. It's all coming up on Normal Show Live. Stay tuned.
This is Normal Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Weedmaps.com. I'm Radical Russ from Normal. In my job as outreach coordinator, I travel every month, and when I'm on the road, I need a fast, accurate way to find the medical marijuana dispensaries in the area. So I turn to Weedmaps.com. Weedmaps.com has the best dispensary locator online or on your mobile device. Search by zip code or let Weedmaps find you, and in seconds you'll have the addresses, phone numbers, and customer service reviews for the medical marijuana dispensaries in the local area. Weedmaps.com also has a section devoted to helping you find a doctor who understands and recommends medical marijuana under your state's law. You can even check prices on the Medical Marijuana Stock Exchange. Coming soon, you'll even be able to find the listings of normal attorneys and chapters, local head shops and grow shops, and the best weed-friendly businesses. Weedmaps.com has the information you need to be an informed cannabis consumer. Visit Weedmaps.com today, a proud sponsor of the Normal Network.
Inhaling deeply of the sacred smoke.
Aloha, this is Zion Thompson from The Green, and you're listening to Normal Show Live.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that gives us these precious rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search or seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney, Omar Figueroa." Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's Normal News with Cannabis Carey.
Cannabis Carey's on vacation this week. I'm Radical Russ with your Normal News. Seems to be Drug Test Thursday. Lots of stories about drug testing today. A Republican congressman has proposed drug testing people who apply for unemployment insurance. The bill by Representative Jack Kingston of Georgia would require unemployment claimants to pass a drug test if they are identified in an initial screening as having a high probability of drug use. I wonder what kind of screening would be consistent with a high probability of drug use. The way someone dresses, the way someone looks, the color of their skin, their credit score. How exactly do you have a high probability of drug use? Oh, these bills are ridiculous, trying to drug test people. We got plenty more. I got to get to all of them. But one of the things I wanted to note in response to this, there was a bill submitted by another legislator in the Georgia Assembly to have drug testing for all the lawmakers, right? So let's have drug testing for all the lawmakers. And that leads me to another one of the stories that we've got here coming out of Bakersfield, California, with a story of a law enforcement officer who was caught using meth on the job. A day after a Bakersfield police officer was busted for taking meth, a lot of people are asking about police and drug testing. 23abc.com found that neither the Bakersfield Police Department nor the Sheriff's Office has random drug testing for its officers. Most people that we spoke to didn't realize law enforcement officers don't have to take random drug tests. Bakersfield police say Officer Ofelio Lopez was busted with and on meth last week. 23ABC asked people what they thought about the situation, and the reactions from these people said, there's a few of these here where they said, I think it's unfair because everyone else has to do random drug testing. Another person said, I think they should definitely be involved in testing just like everyone else. And another person said, I don't see why they should be exempt from that. And so these two stories, with the Georgia story and this Bakersfield, California story, bring something up in the marijuana law reform and drug law reform that just always bothers me. And that's when we tell stories about drug testing. And, first of all, the fact that people right now to get jobs have to pee in a cup and all of that people's response when they find out cops don't get drug tested or that lawmakers don't get drug tested isn't that we shouldn't be drug tested either. It's you should be drug tested too. I've got a big problem with that because we have shown time and time again that this drug testing is ineffective and it's at most catching most drugs. In the situation with the cop where Ofelio Lopez was caught with meth, right? Methamphetamine will leave a person's body within 1 to 2 days of use. So if this cop was just occasionally using meth and you had random drug testing in place, it's highly likely you'd have never caught him unless he was using it every single day. But when it comes to marijuana, if that same cop had been smoking a joint off duty a couple of weeks ago, it's possible that he could still test positive on the random test 7 to 10 days from then. Now, I know some people would say, well, Russ, pot's illegal. Cops shouldn't be smoking pot. But the whole point here isn't what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's whether or not we should be invading people's bodily integrity to try to detect whether they're committing a crime without any suspicion of them committing a crime in the first place. The act of trying to get a job or the act of being employed is not probable cause to surrender our Fourth Amendment rights and our Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, for that matter, to a drug test for an employer, for a government, or for anyone. The answer to drug testing is not more drug testing. We need to see less drug testing overall for everyone. Continuing on the drug testing, better news coming from, and I'm going to pick up this story, out of Belleville, New Jersey, although they spell it a little differently. Belleville Town Hall and Fire Department employees will no longer be subject to random drug tests under a new policy recently proposed by Mayor Ray Kimball. That's right. Only township employees who are required to maintain a commercial's driver's license will be randomly tested according to the policy. Kimball said he proposed the amended employee policy to fall in line with federal guidelines. Under those guidelines, non-essential public employees, such as secretaries and clerks, should not be randomly tested, said Kimball. We can be sued, he said, unless we have reasonable suspicion. So here's a situation where in Belleville, New Jersey, they were going beyond the federal guidelines and randomly testing just every old secretary. And apparently a lot of these secretaries and other people in the non-commercial driver's license positions were starting to complain about this during contract negotiations. And this is, and why is it that government employees should get a reasonable expectation of privacy that they're not committing a crime? There has to be reasonable suspicion of a drug test. But in the private sector, since it's not government, you have the choice as to whether or not you work for that company. It's your choice. If you don't like their drug testing, you can just leave and go get another job because, that's so easy. It's just a shame that we continue to sacrifice our civil liberties in this illusion that we're somehow going to make ourselves safer. We're going to somehow make our workplaces safer from drug use, which really there's not a big danger of drug use in the workplace as it is at this point anyway. You get the occasional scare story now and then about a forklift driver backing over someone, but that's just workplace accidents. That's going to happen. We don't have an epidemic of drug use and people coming to work stoned, especially if you just use good old-fashioned management techniques and watch your employees and interact with your employees. That's the best kind of drug testing there is. Now, speaking of drug testing and going through contract negotiations, the NBA has just come through its negotiations to restart its season that's been on lockout here for the first couple of weeks. And under their new agreement, NBA players have agreed to additional drug testing, adding off-season screening but for performance-enhancing drugs only. Union Executive Director Billy Hunter sent a memo yesterday, obtained by the AP, to players detailing these and other changes of the new labor deal. The NBA would study the possibility of an HGH testing program for blood, and of course a performance-enhancing drug that is. But specifically, they note that according to the memo, beginning in the 2012-2013 season, players can be tested up to 2 times during the off-season for steroids and performance-enhancing drugs only. They would not be screened for drugs such as marijuana. And the reason for that is they would like to still have some players. And in the final bit of Drug Test Thursday news coming out of the Miami Herald, the Florida welfare drug test case. You know, Governor Rick Scott has the law that he put in place to drug test those who would seek welfare in the state of Florida. It's currently been on injunction. A judge has put an injunction on that. And in the time that they have been drug testing these people, the time that they were allowed to drug test these people, they found only a 2.5% positive rate compared to a national positive rate of 7.5%. That's right. People applying for welfare were 1/3 as likely to turn up positive for drugs as the general public. So they were spending tens of thousands of dollars per positive test in Florida just to get those results. Well, the latest news is in from the American Civil Liberties Union. A U.S. District Judge, Mary Scriven in Orlando, Florida, granted a class action request. This means that the suit will go forward as a class action suit on behalf of all Floridians who would be applying for welfare, and not just the person who was the original plaintiff in the suit, Orlando resident Luis Lebron. So this way he can't become a target for the defense to try to tear apart his credibility and such. This becomes a class action suit that affects all Floridians, and we wish the ACLU the best of luck in prosecuting this case. All right, moving to the state of California from ABC News. Once again, the story that we reported on last year, it seems to be happening again this year. A California marijuana dispensary trading pot for food to feed the hungry. Medical marijuana users are accustomed to the munchies sending them on a hunt for food. Now they have a place where giving their food away can score them some pot. For the second year in a row, one of California's medical marijuana dispensaries is doing its part to feed the hungry by offering their patients a trade: 1 free joint for every 6 cans of donated food. We're in a really controversial industry, and we wanted to show that we're here for good, says Nancy Black, sales manager of the Granny Perps dispensary in Soquel, California. The dispensary is running its unique food drive for the second year in a row, trading joints, or pre-rolls, for donated food. There is no limit to the number of free joints a single customer can receive. We've given away 50, 60 pre-rolls at a time to one person for the amount of cans they've brought in. The response has been huge. The dispensary collected more than 12,000 pounds of food last year and gave away about 2,000 joints. This year, they've collected nearly 5,000 pounds since early November. The Food for Pot exchange not only helps feed the hungry, Black says, patients also benefit by getting the marijuana they need without paying the usual $10 per joint. And this is where I wanted to stop and make a comment. Okay, so a can of food costs what? Right? You go out and get a can of green beans or something for 50 cents, 40 cents maybe. Let's say 50 cents. So it takes me 6 cans to come in and get a joint. So I could go and spend $3 in cans of food, and for that $3 a cans of food, you'll give me a joint that you normally sell for $10. And so you want to point out how gracious this is, how wonderful this is for the patients, that they're able to get their regular $10 joint for $3. How come you just don't bring the price of the $10 joint down to $3 in the first place? And one final story coming out of California. Medical marijuana dispensaries outlawed in Sacramento. The Sacramento County supervisors said they wanted to make it unambiguous that they won't permit medical marijuana dispensaries. So the board members have voted a county zoning amendment that fails to include the words medical, marijuana, or dispensaries. Instead, supervisors voted to bring an end to the county's once teeming medical marijuana trade by denying business permits to establishments that conflict with, quote, either state or federal law or both under a new policy approved Tuesday. The board's action comes as after aggressive code enforcement efforts and threats of federal prosecution or property seizures, shuttered all but a handful of marijuana stores in the county's unincorporated communities. Officials said medical marijuana outlets were never permitted under the county zoning laws, but that didn't stop as many as 99 dispensaries from opening in the past 2 years. So board chairwoman Roberta McGlashan said supervisors voted 4-1 Tuesday, quote, to clarify our existing ordinance because it didn't address marijuana dispensaries, end quote. Even though the amended zoning code still doesn't, McGlashan says that the supervisor's vote now effectively bans marijuana stores by making it, quote, clear we don't allow any use that is inconsistent with federal law, end quote. And this battle is going to continue in California and the other medical marijuana states as states fight against the feds for the right to regulate the state at the state level, and localities use the federal law to trump the states to control what's going on at the local level. It's time to end this charade and just legalize marijuana for everyone and stop trying to have this battle between the states and the feds as to how we can treat our own ailments. All right, folks, time to take a break. When we come back, some really great hip-hop, lucid music out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The song called 320. I know it's 320 somewhere, right? Central Time Zone? We'll be back in a minute.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support Normal Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would send you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
Hey, you! I saw that. Don't go teasing us all if you're not going to share. Loose lips cause rips. Never brag about your home grow, even if you're a legal medical grower.
Marijuana and alcohol are the two most popular recreational drugs in America. Marijuana smoking is non-toxic, relatively safe, and has a low risk of dependence. Alcohol drinking is potentially fatal, dangerous to society, and is quite addictive. Marijuana is safer, so why are we driving people to drink? That's the question of the new book, Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are We Driving People to Drink? By Paul Armentano, Mason Tvert, and Steve Fox. Visit Amazon.com or ChelseaGreen.com today to order your copy of Marijuana is Safer, or visit MarijuanaIsSafer.com.
It's time for your daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420 friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we bring you tunes for Groovin' Thursday. Our salute to all the dopest beats and killer rhymes that we find in the best of rap, hip-hop, soul, R&B, and funk. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on Normal Show Live, send it to us at stash@normal.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tune.
All right, folks, going to take a break from some of the holiday music for a while and just get into some good old school hip-hop. This is Lucid Music, which didn't officially become a group until the winter month of December 2005. Before then, it was just two friends making music strictly for the fun of it in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They met while working at the same dead-end retail store. Warren was an MC from Long Beach, California, who had moved to Pittsburgh in 1999 to and take care of his elderly grandmother. Marcus was a Chicago transplant who would freestyle in his grandmother's basement while working toward a degree in business administration. The Lucid Music sound is inspired by the hip-hop its members grew up on. The lyrics are positive and profanity-free, allowing the group to perform for audiences of all ages. Jazz, rock, and funk samples are used to create what can only be described as that old boom bap, up-tempo drums, thick bass lines, melodic horns, and piano. Turntablism also plays an important part of not only their sound, but a live show as well. Lucid Music has distribution through Route70Lounge.com, a Japanese indie label, as well as international distribution with seminal hip-hop label Bomb Hip Hop out of California. You can check them out at Lucid Music. That's lucidmusicwakeup.blogspot.com.
You want a copy of that song for your iPod?
But that's not
Check
it.
out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash
It
blog
would help
by
if we
surfing
actually
the
had the song loaded up. Okay, let's... We're doing it live. Let me go get the song. We'll put that in there. lucidmusicwakeup.blogspot.com is the address. They've also got a SoundCloud out there, YouTube, Facebook. It's all available for you out there. Lucid Music through IOTA Promonet as well. That's where we found them. Let's grab the track here. This is Lucid Music with 320 on your Normal Show Live Daily Toker Tunes.
Yo, the only time I switch is tempos or instrumentals. Bringing back the raw element and fundamentals that got them attacking our signal. Just like a sentinel, never one dimensional, always original. Concentrate my power on the pad and the pencil to focus on creating unforgettable material like Nat King Cole. We here to stimulate your mind, body, and your soul. Soon as I grab a hold of the mic, you know by who the rhythms control. Coming through venue speakers or call radios. Laying in my position till we reach the next pole. Extending the time for what winds down to all zero.
Hey, yo, it's album number quattro, and still it's gospel and art that we impart with each bar, far from docile. It's not so unbelievable or inconceivable that we'll succeed in goals will be achieved in full. Ain't nothing changed but the date and time, making rhymes and beats at night. We can't stop like someone cut our brake lines. We think alike with great minds to combine our efforts, heard through the grapevine about the record. So drop a checkered flag, I'm like a muscle card built to drag, race out for first place, not to keep pace or lag behind a beat. We add heat, let the cadence cook, and don't display the way Matrix agents look. No
vocal effects or repetitive hooks, but still got a reputation that keep us with shows booked. Over past trials and tribulations, others running their mouth, time wasted, we waiting patient, paying dues, making moves to make it an occupation. Supply the hip-hop that you thought was ancient. We let our music speak, we don't need no validation. We don't make singles, we make classic compositions.
Fly-by-night fads get down with prompt dismissing. Quick like the cruise that view us as competition. I'm on a mission to top the last song written, improve upon the mix, then drop some non-fiction. Listen, we align the inflection of our sentences and let the drum pattern determine just how intense it is to make moves like an invisible man, leave a crowd feeling touched without ever seeing a hand.
Opposite of fiction, resisting the trance that so many succumb to from the radio transmission. Cause skills a necessity like breathing oxygen. We think outside the box so we never get boxed in.
What got me feeling like Boston after the Sox win is putting words to work, I can't wait till I'm clocked in. So often we rhyme in overtime to rock the spot then. Wish peace upon an audience, we're glad you stopped in.
Whoever's watching may not hit us in your top 10, but could get the crowd to move like when you see a Sharks fan.
And the Jaws theme starts in, we're like Spartan marksmen, determined to be on point when the pencil sharpened.
Cause each album we raise the stakes like gas prices.
We lay bets on stages, turntables, and mic devices.
Made countless sacrifices and been in more uphill battles than a cyclist.
I'm nice with this, and despite of this, I see signs to swing away at home plate, knock it out the park over an unknown break.
I take a leap of faith whenever the plates rotate and demonstrate. Soon as my lines take shape that I got what it takes, but let it be no mistake. I take it serious like a bomb threat to your workplace.
Life is a muse, the stage is our workspace. Let's take it serious like Gorn and Eames' worst case. And if you're sick of soft beats and dumb rhymes, by these clowns will make it rain, we're here to bring the sunshine.
Can I drop the bomb? Oh yes, I can. You know where to find me whenever you need me. Been crazy years with the blues paying dues. Take it back to the basics.
You want a copy of that song for your iPod? Check out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.normal.org and choosing Media and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Yarr, thar be pirates here. Har, har, har,
rednecks love the normal show. Har har, 'cause it's always smoking matey. Har 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 har.
This is Normal Show Live.
Ever wonder how often to change your bong water? The most effective method for baking pot brownies? The best destinations for a ganja getaway? How to hide herb in your car? Whether to grow your own? How precisely to legalize it? Or how something as wonderful as marijuana ever got to be illegal in the first place? Finally, you can find all these answers and much more in the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook, featuring 420 things to do when you're stoned. Since 1974, High Times magazine has covered marijuana in all its aspects and wonders, from cultivation to legalization to the herb's enduring and exalted place in popular culture. Packed with inside information, the official High Times Pot Smoker's Handbook rolls all of this collected wisdom together into a single indispensable ganja guide, including an entertaining look at marijuana's history, profiles of herb-friendly travel destinations and festivals, favorite potluck recipes from the High Times staff, smoking skills, advocacy and activism, essential marijuana movies and songs, profiles of famous cannabis strains, comprehensive growing information, celebrity endorsements, and much more. This is truly, finally, the ultimate guide to green living.
Cannonball coming.
Do you really want to legalize marijuana? Prove it. Join Normal today at NORML.org, and your donation will help us spread the growing truth about cannabis. Free speech ain't free, you know.
Free the ganja tree, it's the healing of the nation. Free the Cali weed, good for meditation. Free the pot smokers, they read not delight. Lighting up the chalice, they keep no malice. Free the marijuana, come on, say. Free the marijuana, hear me, say. Free the marijuana, come on, say. Free the marijuana.
One of the most disturbing elements of the war on marijuana is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows firsthand the futility of the drug war and reaches out to the community and to current law enforcement to end our war on drugs through legalization. It's time now to speak to one such officer in our continuing look at law enforcement against prohibition.
All right, time to go out to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where we're speaking with Tony Ryan. He's a former retired lieutenant with the Denver Police Department and a member of the board of directors for law enforcement against prohibition. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You know, I was reading your bio here, and it looks like, you know, just from reading your bio, you took as much damage to yourself, your body, as someone who's been in an actual war. Tell some folks about your background in policing and how you served in Denver.
Well, in Denver, I was started out when I was just 23. And early on in my career, exactly my second anniversary, I responded to an alarm in a small branch savings and loan bank being robbed, and the old tactics, which nobody uses nowadays, but that was 1969. You go in and see what's happening. You look around, you see what it looks like, and it looked normal. One guy standing, looking like a customer, and a couple of the bank employees, the only two that were in this little strip mall place. And it resulted in a shootout because there was a second guy hiding on the other side of the teller counter that they were afraid to tell me about, and so while I'm frisking and shaking down the first guy after they shook their head that yes, the alarm was real, stood up behind me, behind my back from about 5 feet away, and was getting ready to shoot me, and I caught him out of the corner of my eye and spun around and took it through the chest. So, and then the first guy who had a gun and a bag on the counter went for his gun, and I'm on my back on the floor thinking something's not right here. You know?
Yeah.
And he pulled out that gun, and I shot him.
Wow.
Before he could shoot me again. Then the other guy played Jack in the Box in the teller window, popped up and down and fired. According to the lab, I wasn't counting. I was just trying to defend myself. He fired at me. They said according to chips in the tile floor, he fired at me 7 more times. So.
Jeez. Wow.
And then because I almost parted his hair a couple of times when he jumped up in the window, he ran through the back door. It was locked, so I ran through the glass and took off. So.
Wow, what a career here.
Major.
And how many years had you been a police officer?
When that happened, that was 2 years.
Wow. 2 years in, and now 36 years of total service as a police officer. So, this situation you described, the violence you described, part of a bank robbery. Let's talk about the war on drugs part of it. Were you subject to a lot of violence trying to enforce drug laws?
Actually, I only enforced drug laws when I had to. I was never a narc. I didn't work in the narcotics. I was almost always a street officer through all my ranks, and it didn't take me long to decide that I didn't really want to go into vice and narcotics. It just I thought that was an uphill battle that you can never win. I thought there should be other ways for society to deal with those kinds of problems. I thought it was a societal thing, and society should be a way to put pressure through various means on people who are having problems with those things. And I looked at some of the guys that were narcs, and no offense to anybody intended here, but some of them acted, kind of crazy,
Sure.
Some of these drug raids, and I made this comment before, and some of these drug raids, the highest people there are the cops doing the raid that are high on adrenaline, especially if they're doing a marijuana raid. I mean, come on, folks.
Really. And that points at something that we've covered on the show many times. And Radley Balco, who writes for Reason Magazine and Huffington Post, recently had a very long essay up on the paramilitarization of our domestic police forces and this overuse of SWAT. And being that, you started, back in late 60s, before we really used SWAT for anything but, dangerous bank robberies or hostage situations. Tell us how you saw that creep into policing throughout your career.
Denver's a fair-sized city, and it has a fair-sized police department of about 1,400, a little over, depending on the budget. But in Denver, even in the years when we had our version of the problems at the end of the 60s, with the death of Martin Luther King, and we didn't really have riots. We had huge disturbances, but I don't think we could really call them riots. For us, they were. But SWAT, we had a few incidents where what I would call is a real SWAT situation, where somebody had harmed somebody, or done something and was holed up with hostages and all of that kind of stuff. These guys have all this equipment that nobody else on a police force, any police force, has. Only the SWAT guys have. And then they want to go kick in the door of a marijuana user, and I'm thinking, I was one of the guys that responded to a call and faced people with guns with just didn't even have vests in those days.
Sure.
In 1969, and I was in charge of the sergeant for 12 years, the lieutenant for 14 years, of street troops who had vests, and that's about it. They didn't have all this other stuff, and they had their sidearms. Most of them, some of them. They had shotguns if they thought to take them out, and some of them had rifles, special rifles. But they handle stuff all day where somebody all of a sudden pulls out a gun or a knife. They don't have all this extra equipment, and they're the guys that are doing the day-to-day battles. I thought there's something wrong with this whole thing.
Yeah. And one of the responses we'll get back sometimes, Tony, and we're speaking with Tony Ryan from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, a former police lieutenant in Denver, Colorado. One of the things that we'll hear back, though, is that these guys, these drug kingpins, these cartels, they got the AK-47s and they got the armor-piercing bullets, and so we have to ramp up all of our military gear. Is there any real truth to that?
Well, to the extent that what you said, that if they were going into Mexico and attacking the home of a cartel operator, I'm sure that would be the case. But the kicking in doors of average citizens, and when you have heroes like DEA who, if you look at their stats, their whole business is marijuana. Mm-hmm. They talk about their seizures. 96% of them last year were marijuana. So they put on all this gear and they're kicking in doors and shouting and firing weapons at dogs and all this other stuff that they do to catch the wily, dangerous pot smoker. And I think that's just a little bit of an overkill. That's how I look at it. I don't know that they...
You're a master of understatement. Yeah, a little bit of overkill, yeah. You also mentioned in your bio here that drug enforcement activities are one of the highest sources of complaints against law enforcement. Tell us how the war on drugs, we know how it ruins our lives on our side, those of us who smoke marijuana. How does it ruin policing and police departments?
Well, first of all, you have the raids. And the culture that goes along with enforcing the war on drugs, and where somebody wants to become a big narc and become famous for whatever through being a narc, and you get people in the game that's always played, and I know that almost everybody out there knows about this, but you get somebody with a little bit of marijuana, you put some pressure on them, give us somebody bigger, and we'll give you a deal and let you off light and so forth and so on. And so then people start trying to find someone that they can send the enforcers after to give them a break. And because they get so carried away with this, because the government's handing out all of this money to all these police departments to do the war on drugs, and you have to perform to maintain your flow of government money, then they get bad information. And so then all of a sudden somebody's kicking in the door of the wrong house, and there's somebody's grandparents there. And sometimes, as happened in Atlanta a few years back, somebody's great-grandmother gets gunned down by officers that are thinking they're doing a drug raid. And there were no drugs there, but these guys, you've heard this whole story, they put drugs there.
Sure.
And then the cops ended up going to prison when all of that was found out, trying to justify the fact that they were there. Well, she shot at us, and she was really a good shot. 4 officers were wounded, and they found out that the officers and their friends, they shot each other.
Oh, no.
She didn't shoot anybody, I mean, it's just this stuff. That's what I say. They're all hepped up. It goes gunny bag nuts and gets totally out of control more times than not. And it's just unnecessary. And all we need to do is change our whole policy. You guys are all about marijuana, and that's the biggest part of the issue. But we have to change our policy, as we always say at LEAP, on all of these drugs and the entire drug war, and come up with a different way to reduce the use of drugs, especially the dangerous drugs, the ones that can cause addiction and so forth and so on. And it isn't by kicking indoors and doing that kind of stuff and filling our prisons with people who otherwise are no threat to society.
You mentioned earlier on how you found you definitely didn't want to be involved in narcotics and vice. So we've talked about narcotics. How about vice? I mean, how does this philosophy not also apply to things like gambling or prostitution?
Well, in those days, gambling was illegal, a lot of it, so it was underground, like whenever you prohibit activity that humans like to engage in, it always goes underground. There wasn't a whole lot of danger in gambling when people got into debt, and then there were bad things happening to people who couldn't pay their debts. And that's kind of, you take that chance, that's sometimes what you get. That was kind of my attitude. I didn't think people should be killed or have their legs broken or whatever, but because that's an assault against a person, and that's against the law, and should be.
Sure.
But, prostitution, it's, I think since Eve had competition, we've had prostitution. So, I think it's a human nature thing, and we go about educating it. Churches, for the most part, are successful in having their people believe that that's probably not a good thing for you to do with your life or to partake in, and so forth and so on. But it still happens, and no matter what you do with it. And my attitude was, let's just control it. And that's where LEAP is with drugs. Let's regulate and control it, realizing you're not going to stop it completely, but at least you can get it to where it makes sense, and it's far toned down from what it is now. So if you got it off the street, and a lot of these prostitutes are fed drugs and become addicts, and then they're forced to work to support their addiction. So if you got it off the street and put it in brothels, which in some places are actually legal, then you have a far less of a problem with that.
Interesting. Very interesting. I appreciate your perspective, Tony, and we appreciate, of course, what Law Enforcement Against Prohibition is doing. I want to encourage everyone to check out the website at leap.cc, leap.cc. That's a short one, or you can go to copssaylegalizedrugs.com and find the same stuff. Tony, are you out speaking lately? Do you have any appearances coming up soon?
Not on the near horizon, but there'll be plenty. We're going to be doing our 10th anniversary stuff next year.
That's right, the 10th anniversary of LEAP. Well, congratulations on that. And Tony Ryan from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, also had served at the Denver Police Department for 36 years. We appreciate your service, and thanks so much for joining us here on Normal Show Live.
Thanks.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind. That's
listening to the Normal Network, where the time is 4:20, 24/7, 365.
Aloha, everyone. This is Wiz Kaliko from the Irie Island Hour, inviting you to join us at our new time on the Normal Network, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific at live.normal.org. We also replay 6 hours later at 2 a.m., and we have weekend replays at 6 p.m. Pacific on Saturdays. You can also go ahead and start your week off on a good foot and get in an Irie mood on Mondays at 8 a.m. Check us out at live.normal.org and at irieislandhour.podomatic.com.
It's tough talking to kids about marijuana, especially if you might be a parent who dabbled a time or two in your youth. So to help you out, get your copy of Dr. Mitch Earlywine's latest book, A Parent's Guide to Marijuana. Dr. Earlywine is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and an expert on the studies concerning marijuana, its effect on health and society, and the methodology behind the statistics. He is a frequent guest here on our daily audio stash. Dr. Earlywine lays it all out without the propaganda and scare tactics that parents know won't work with teenagers. He presents a rational understanding of cannabis, what it is and what it isn't, and why kids shouldn't be using marijuana. You can order today through Amazon.com or check our links at our blog, stash.normal.org.
Alternative Medical Choices offers healthcare the way it should be. Easy to access, patient-centered, team-based, and quality-focused. We offer a variety of natural, affordable healthcare treatment options like primary care, group acupuncture, massage, and assistance with OMP registration. As a patient, you will have a team of experts working with you to make you the best you can be. Call Alternative Medical Choices at 503-288-5579 or check us out on the web at altmedchoices.com.
Michael Phelps, Olympic superstar, 14 gold medals, world record holder. Bomb smoker. So much for that amotivational syndrome. Legalization, decriminalization, lowest law enforcement priority, medical marijuana, ganja sacrament, consumer cannabis, industrial hemp. The world of marijuana law reform involves many different aspects of cannabis that interact nearly every public policy discussion in America, including healthcare, the economy, global climate change, law enforcement in prisons, immigration, religion, free speech, energy policy, and war. Now, we take a look at how re-legalizing marijuana will change the world in our Normal Show Live Cannabis Conversations.
All right, been looking forward to getting this next gentleman on the air. He is the blog master behind the enormously successful tokeofthetown.com and the author of the new book, The Little Black Book of Marijuana, which looks bigger when it's on cam, but here, I'll pull back a little bit. There, The Little Black Book of Marijuana. Welcome Steve Elliott to the show. Steve, how you doing?
Good, Russ. How are you?
Doing great. Having a good time here on the show. And thank you for the copy of the Little Black Book that you sent out.
Absolutely.
Let's start with that. Let's tell folks what is the Little Black Book of Marijuana and why they must have one.
A little over a year ago, Peter Pauper Press decided that they were going to do a marijuana book. And I came to their attention because of Toke of the Town. They approached me about doing the project, and I agreed to do it. They wanted 20,000 words on the history of marijuana, and of course, to me, 20,000 words sounded less like a book and more like a long essay. But I decided that I was going to try to cram as much as I could in those 20,000 words, because I decided, what if I turn this thing down and somebody does a really bad job the next guy they ask? Yeah. So to keep that from happening, I didn't want that on my conscience.
All right. Well, you've done a great job with it too, and I even like this little strap in the back, kind of like a you can keep your place, little placeholder. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have been remarking on that. It is officially a placeholder, but I also know that some people have been putting joints in there.
You know what? That would work pretty good for that now that I think about it. Well put. Well, the last time we got to see each other, we were at Seattle Hemp Fest, and we were appearing on a panel together. So it's been about, 4 months here? So what's been happening? What's been happening for you since then?
Things have been popping right along with not only Toke of the Town, but also the parent company, of course, that owns Toke, Village Voice Media, also owns a chain of alternative weeklies, including Seattle Weekly.
Right.
So when Seattle Weekly decided they were going to do a dispensary review, they asked if I would be interested in that. And, of course, that's a dream gig, so I jumped at the chance and...
The audience loves it.
Thank you. I became second in line after William Breeds out in Denver at Westward as far as the marijuana dispensary reviewers working for a national chain. So, Will's number one, but I'm number two.
Well, that's the pretty... I mean, as far as the job market goes, it's one of the most, shall we say, highly prized jobs you could get?
Absolutely. It's also a responsibility. And then you also become kind of a target from all directions. But, of course, I'm not whining. I knew that going in. So, law enforcement, of course, doesn't like the idea. And then if a dispensary, on that rare occasion that they should get a less than glowing review, they're not too crazy about that either. But actually, the couple of times that I found it necessary to give someone a less than stellar review, they actually were very professional about it and got back to me and said, we looked at those problems. We think we're doing better now. You should come back and see us.
Good. I'm glad that's having a positive effect. And I know it can be difficult sometimes to step in front of the choir and sometimes tell them things they don't want to hear. So I've caught a little bit of that too, Steve. So I know how you feel.
Exactly. But it does tend to happen. Sometimes it seems like those within the movement kind of expect you to believe all the exact things they do, or else you're a quote-unquote traitor to the movement.
Agent provocateur.
Exactly. That sort of disinformation is not a good thing.
Yeah. Steve, I wonder if between you and I, if we were to compare comment sections, we could have a contest on who's been called co-Intel Pro more often.
Yeah, and it seems like one of the first things they go to,
what the hell?
They go right past jerk and idiot all the way to COINTELPRO.
It's amazing to me. And another thing, I envy a lot of what you're doing there. Dispensary reviews, what fun that must be. But there's one thing I don't envy at this point, and that is having to be in Washington State right now with the dueling initiatives that are going on right now. It's getting kind of heated up there. What's the latest on our legalization chances in Washington?
We have the highly visible, very well funded, with lots of respectable backers, I-502, which is sponsored by New Approach Washington, and that's kind of a splinter group of the Washington ACLU, along with some big backers. And that thing, of course, it's hard to be against any legalization measure. But what they did was some focus group polling, and they drilled down to the problem areas that might keep Joe Sixpack from voting for this thing. And one of those that they discovered was that people are afraid of stoned drivers on the road. They know that, what carnage there is due to alcohol on the highways. And Mr. and Mrs. Suburbia, who may not be extensively experienced with marijuana, they're justifiably concerned about what might happen with high drivers. And so to address that concern, what I-502 has done is establish a 5 nanogram per milliliter limit, as if it were equivalent to drunk driving, like the 0.08 that we have for drunk driving. They're trying to establish kind of a corollary for that. But, of course, that's where the controversy comes in, with patients likely never dipping below that 5 nanogram per milliliter limit. So a lot of people in the community feel that would effectively criminalize all driving by patients. Since, we wake up in the morning and we're already over that 5 nanograms.
Oh, sure.
And that's before we're unimpaired. So that seems to me a legitimate concern, and of course that's a big point of controversy, whether that net is going to catch a lot of fish that we really don't want to see in court.
Sure. And then we got the other initiative, the 505. What's the latest on that?
That would be a more complete form of legalization. It wouldn't include those driving under the influence limits and things like that, and actually it would be more a way of getting rid of the current marijuana laws than instituting a new regulatory structure. And of course, while that's exciting, that's also the sticking point for some people who say you can't throw out these pot laws without putting something in their place.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are the two alternatives that we're looking at right now. And of course, with the second one, we would be, depending on the legislature, to step forward and to institute some sort of sensible regulations once the other laws had been thrown out.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Steve Elliott, the editor at Talk of the Town and the dispensary reviewer for the Seattle Weekly and the author of this, The Little Black Book of Marijuana. And Steve, what are some of the stories that you've been covering on Talk of the Town that have gotten the most, say, controversial response from the cannabis community?
I know that whenever I cover some of the abuses that have gone on in the name of drug task forces, that seems to get a lot of attention and interest. Right now, there is a story on Talk of the Town where, in my typical understated fashion, I headlined it, "Drug Cops Exposed as Violent, Ineffective Thugs."
Really?
And what's going on in this particular case is that one of these federally funded local task forces, in this case the WestNet Task Force here in Washington State, which is West Puget Sound Narcotics Enforcement Team, they have quite a track record now behind them, and a local newspaper, the Tacoma News Tribune, did a great expose on them a couple days ago, where they, they used the word cowboys in describing them, and they said that word kept coming up over and over. And apparently, they're quite gung-ho about rating medical marijuana patients who were trying to abide by Washington state law, and they're what the News Tribune called it, and I thought rather charitably on their part, they called it mission drift. The fact that they had gotten away from busting, say, these major methamphetamine labs or cocaine distribution rings, and had actually spent apparently much of their time and budget pursuing medical marijuana patients. Mm-hmm. And some really unfortunate things have happened in that regard. Like they have, they busted down doors of patients and pointed guns in children's faces. They even went so far as to confiscate the money out of one 9-year-old girl's Mickey Mouse wallet as possible drug proceeds. Another kid, they broke in and there was an Etch-a-Sketch laying there, so they bust open the kid's Etch-a-Sketch and look inside and claim that they're checking for drugs inside there.
Right. Yes, because we've been...
Another patient had a legal basement garden, and they decided they needed to do a SWAT raid on him, and his poor old 11-year-old female dog, they shot a pepper ball at her and put one of her eyes out with it. So it's just a series of unfortunate encounters between law enforcement and patients that never had to happen.
Yeah, it's such a shame every time we have to tell that story. And, Steve, we're coming up here at the top of the hour. Before we let you go, I just have to find out, do you have any particular favorites in mind for college football bowl games coming up this season?
Well, my particular favorite had their year last year, Russ, and they're not so good this year. Auburn.
I'm doing this on purpose to tease you. Stereotypes in the chat room saying "Roll Tide, roll."
This is what we call a rebuilding year at Auburn.
Rebuilding or trying to get enough money to buy another quarterback. But let's just leave it at that. Steve Elliott from Talk of the Town, thanks for joining us here on Normal Show Live. I'm sure I'll see you at the next event. Are you going to be at the... they're going to be doing a High Times Medical Cannabis Cup in L.A. come February. Might make it out there?
That's a possibility at this point. I can't say that I will be there for sure, but I would absolutely love to be.
All right. Well, I'll see if I see you there, and I hope I do.
All right, Russ. Talk to you later.
All right, see you, Steve. Thanks so much. That's all the time we got here for Hour 1. I want to thank Steve Elliott for joining us from Toke of the Town, Tony Ryan from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. For those of you listening live at 1 o'clock Pacific or 4 o'clock Eastern, we are going into Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio. You can call in at 971-533-7111 and get your opinions on the air and on the record. But for those of you listening on the replays of the podcast, that's it for now. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and interviews you can use for the cannabis community. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
We love the earth. This is Normal Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Take it out one more time. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.